درود فراوان به شما هم میهنان عزیز در سرتاسر کشور. سرلشکر خلبان مهدی روحانی از گروه نظام سیاسی عقاب ایران با شما عزیزان صحبت میکنم. این بخشید امروز یک کمی من باید تند صحبت بکنم، همونجور که هفته پیش به استحضار همتون رسونده بودم. این هفته برنامه ما به انگلیسی اجرا خواهد شد برای اینکه مهمان والاقدری داریم. یکی از سیاستمداران بزرگ امریکا، ما در خدمتشون هستیم و بعد همه برنامه همونجور که عرض کردم به انگلیسی خواهد بود. من قبل از اینکه فراموش کنم روز کارگر رو به تمام کارگران عزیز، واقعا عزیزمون تبریک عرض میکنم. انشالله هفته بعد در این زمینه من باز بیشتر باهاتون صحبت میکنم. دوستان عزیزان، هفته بعد ما برنامه امروز رو به طور کلی تجزیه تحلیل میکنیم. اگر بعضی هایتون یه وقتی یه جایشو جا انداختین فرار شد نتونستین بگیرینش، آماده باشین که هفته بعد به طور کامل فارسی این برنامه رو مجددا براتون تکرار میکنیم. ویدیوی اول. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm not going to make a mistake. Go back from English to Farsi and back from Farsi to English. Our program will be in English today, and the whole program is about what you have seen on the screen was about 3 weeks ago. We've been invited, Eagle of Iran were invited to iCaucus annual or monthly meeting or whatever. We've been there. We really enjoyed while we've been there. And the movie you look at it was taken about 3 weeks ago by then. As you know, iCaucus is one of the greatest, really valuable organization in this country, in the United States. We are spread all over the world. That we're going to talk about that together. You will see that. Now I have high-level politicians, nice lady named Miss Dara Dale. Change the name, then I'll make a little bit mistake. Miss Dara Dale, thank you so much for wasting your time and participating in our program, and I really appreciate for you being here. Now I really want you to introduce yourself and also friend of ours in Skype.
Thank you for having me. Describe myself or the organization. I have prepared some things that were asked of us by part of the Iranian community. So eventually I would like to get to that. As far as me, I am the president of iCaucus. iCaucus is a citizen organization. You'll also be introducing Tom Norton, who has also been part of our leadership. We have been involved in the United States elections and also changing policies for the American government. So we've been doing that about 5 years with iCaucus.
Very good, thanks a lot. But I add a little bit to it. When we've been there last 2-3 weeks or so, the very first thing was very interesting for me. They were explaining that their own organization, means iCaucus, is neither Republican nor Democrat, like Eagle of Iran. As all of you know, we are neither Democrat or no Republican. We're going to just really see what people of Iran wanted. And they said it's not important for us who's going to go get the governmental chair. Important for us is who's going to help the country, who's going to serve the country. Therefore, that's the reason we really enjoyed finding that really nice political group to be with them together, which we are now. We are very happy that I'll talk a little bit later about that. Now we have about 6 minutes of video. Please look at that 6 minutes video. We both come back to it again. Before we go to that 6 minutes video, I would like Tom Norton come on the line and introduce himself.
The following statement was voted on by 85% of iCaucus members. iCaucus is a citizen-led organization, and we vote before we release anything. On a personal note, the reason why I'm doing this video is I believe in what Ronald Reagan said of the shining city on the hill. All societies throughout the world should be able to be that shining city. I think the world would have more peace if we were competing as societies in order to be the shining city and competing of who has more freedom in a society with economics bustling everywhere. To the people of Iran, in the spirit of President Ronald Reagan, we members and associates of iCaucus would like to send a message of support and a long overdue apology to the Iranian people. Since Iran is currently being used to curtail our freedoms and the disinformation continues, we felt this was the time to ensure the Iranian people to hear from the American people. President Reagan said in his debate against Walter Mondale, "I did criticize President Carter because of our undercutting of what was a stalwart ally, the Shah of Iran. And I'm not all that convinced that he was that far out of line with his people or they wanted that to happen. The Shah had done our bidding in the Middle East and carried the load for quite some time. And I did think that was a blot on our record that we let him down. Have things gotten better? The Shah, whatever he might have done, was building low-cost housing, had taken land away from the mullahs, and was distributing it to the peasants so they could be landowners. Things of that kind. But we turned it over to a maniacal fanatic who has slaughtered thousands and thousands of people, calling it executions. We recognize that you are fighting for your rights to be free again, to have liberty and freedom. We understand that our government not only reneged on standing with you, but has backed the mullahs. Please know this stance is not representative of the majority of American people's wishes. We know your country is under occupation and that your president is handpicked by the supreme leader who himself comes from unknown origins and is busy robbing you of your vast wealth, liberty, and freedom. Iran is being sold to shadowy business interests and the respective governments via these mullahs. Just as ours is, it is time to return the power back to the Iranian people. Just as we are fighting to save ours, in the spirit of cooperation, we would like to inform you that our current politicians have no intention of creating regime change. On the contrary, they are supporting and backing the mullahs. We understand how closely your struggle to be free and our struggle to keep from losing our freedoms are tied together. We have full understanding how the leftist Carter administration brought about the fall of the Shah's government and plunged the region into chaos. Until the world sets the record straight, we know the region and the rest of the world will not find peace again. Even though the truth was hidden from us at that time, it is time to tell the world the truth in support of you. Only by acknowledging this can we start to open a true dialogue that would expose the lies and the matrix that has been created by the left-wing media that have brought much of the world into decades of war. President Jimmy Carter went from calling the Shah an island of stability to transferring $150 million into Ayatollah Khomeini's bank account to jumpstart the Islamic Republic while he was still in France. This caused the death and torture of millions of Iranian people. We would like to formally apologize for what some leftists in our government have done to your people. Many governments around the world have benefited and continue to benefit from the state of affairs despite the tragic destruction of life and property that has been perpetrated on your people. Those of us who had been to Iran before the revolution witnessed unprecedented economic growth that has not been matched in any nation since that time, only to see it reverse under the current regime. We recognize the wrong that was done to you, stand with you, and pray for those who would restore Iran to her former glory.
Mr. Tom Norton, thanks a lot. Was not any way to be possible explain better than what you did during last 35 years. I've listened a lots of those kind of explanation or political explanation. Never ever happened like that, which I feel I'm you. While you were talking, I thought I am talking. Thank you so much, Tom. Stay on the line, please. If sometime again we need your help to come to help us. Now back to Miss Dale. As we've been talking together on 3 weeks ago, long time, we got some kind of imagination from your organization. As appeared at the first time is that you made that organization to be a political affect for your government, and what we've seen shows that somehow, mostly, I know you are not, but mostly you intend to be towards some kind of democratic terminology or so. Would that possible explain a little bit for us the same thing which I said, and always I say in Farsi to our people that we are neither Republican nor Democrat. Since I find you are the same, would you please kindly explain about that a little bit?
Absolutely. iCaucus is what they refer to as nonpartisan in the United States. Our government is formed where there are 3 power bases: the federal government, the state governments, and then the people. The federal government's power is supposed to be very limited. The states are supposed to have a little bit more power, but most of the decision making is supposed to be through the will of the people, as long as it's within our constitutional boundaries. What we found over time is that we've been moving further and further and further away from that due to what we would refer to as leftists in our country who have begun to push it in another direction.
Right.
So iCaucus formed as a way for the citizens of this country to join together. That's what the I stands for, individual and independence.
Right.
And they come together and they do things such as vet, endorse, and get candidates elected for office. So we change our representation. Everything starts there. They do research on each candidate. We put them through background checks. Once they're elected, we hold them accountable, which has been something that has been missing. One of the reasons it has taken this long for a statement to be made from the American people to the Iranians is because we weren't holding anybody accountable. We didn't know. So these are the things that we've begun to change. We do education, as you showed in your 1-minute clip. Part of that education now has to be the truth of some of our foreign policy decisions, including what interference the government had in Iran, what dealing with them now is going to be, or should be.
Right.
Because I don't know many Americans who are real happy with how they're dealing with the mullah's regime right now. This is the purpose of iCaucus, to educate, to empower citizens. For Americans, that would be empowering them through the whole electoral process from start to finish. And for citizens in other countries now, it would be empowering them to stand up for their freedom, their liberty as individuals.
Right. Anyway, I add one more comment on what you said, then come back to see if Tom has something to say. Lots of friends of mine, my family possibly, all of them know always what I talk about the government of the United States and people and their relations together. Always I was saying that soon as you select your president, just leave him alone and you go home. That was exactly what you explained now. You see how they match each other. And that is still, I do believe on that, but you come from some corner of the country to correct that, possibly if I'm right, that whenever they select the president, go home and leave him or her possibly alone and let them do anything. And that is what, when I talk with the communities, friends, relatives, most of them agreed with me. Do you agree that whatever I explained just a little bit to you is correct, is wrong, or somehow is correct and wrong?
Well, first of all, the presidency in the United States is supposed to be more of a figurehead. He's supposed to not have a lot of power on purpose.
But how?
He's not supposed to be able to make most of the decisions that, for instance, our current administration's making.
Yes.
And even the former. I mean, you talked about the fact that we're neither Democrat or Republican. That's because they both have the same issues. They both have been in the wrong. They both have made bad decisions. So the presidency is actually supposed to have very limited power. Most of the power structure is supposed to be in Congress. That's the House of Representatives and the Senate.
Right.
That's where that power is supposed to be concentrated. And then also the judicial branch. That is not what is occurring. Most people have the opinion that our president matters. It only matters outside of the country. He's a diplomat, basically. But as far as the American people, yes, there has been apathy. There has been voting for the lesser of two evils, so to speak.
Yeah.
There has been voting in the polls, going home and not really watching what they were doing. Whether it be the president or Congress, they were not watching what was doing. They were not watching the lobbyists. How many of our representatives are paid off before they actually get into office? These were the things that Americans have begun to learn as our freedoms are being taken and as our liberties are being taken. We're realizing that we did not do our jobs. Under our system of government, we did not do our jobs.
That's right.
Now is the time, no matter what part of the community you're with, to stand together and do our jobs. We need to stand together and we need to hold them accountable.
Well, thanks a lot. That's what I found it, and what very, very, really enjoyable. Tom, do you have something to add to our discussion?
Yeah, I can add a little bit. One of the biggest things that we sit there and see around the world is people starting to stand up against their governments, wanting freedom. In Venezuela, Iran has stood up twice against their government, and ours has fallen on deaf ears by not doing anything. What people need to realize is that if they all stand up as a force, as a massive group together, they can claim their freedom. Government cannot dictate anything to people unless it sits idly by and does nothing. In our nation, it was people standing up that created the republic, that created the states and created all this freedom. This statement, and iCaucus in doing it, a lot of people say it may be just us getting into international business, and it's not. We have the highest concentration of Iranian refugees that came here seeking the same freedom that they once had in Iran. With us having the highest concentration of Iranians outside of the country itself, it now becomes an American issue. Because the Iranians that have come here are also Americans. And that's an important aspect that people need to realize. They lost their freedoms there, and now they need to help us here so we can keep our freedoms. And the people that are still in Iran need to stand up and retake what is rightfully theirs.
Yeah, thank you so much. My next question is, Ms. Dale, about that effect of whatever you have it. First of all, I never asked you how many years you have that iCaucus formed.
Right. iCaucus was formed in 2009. The original founders are still part of our advisory board. It was founded as Independence Caucus. What they found is a way to take a lot of the money out of the campaigning. Instead of it taking $1 million to run for a congressional district, that they could cut those funds to about $250,000 funded by the citizens of the district. By introducing the people, the candidates who are running for office to the people of the community through in-home meetings, through neighborhood barbecues, getting out and walking the districts. It's old campaigning, the way campaigning used to be. And it takes a lot of the money out. Instead of them spending $1 million on just radio and TV ads, now the people get a chance to actually ask questions. The other thing that they found was when you, as a citizen, have a representative who commits to you in writing, all of a sudden they find it very difficult to break that commitment. Right. One of the things that you will get most often from the political parties when they're training their candidates is don't ever commit to anything. Not in writing, not on camera. Well, the iCaucus process does that. Every question on our questionnaire, and there are 50 for every federal representative based in constitutional, fiscal, and economic principles, limited government principles. And every one of those questions is framed as a commitment. It's do you commit to or do you commit not to do this? Including upholding their oath of office, which is protect and defend the Constitution. So through that, we're able to actually have a record where we can hold them accountable. The other thing it allows us to do is have contact with them on a regular basis. When there's upcoming legislation, we look at that piece of legislation, see if it falls within our principles, decide on whether we are for or against that legislation, and then call each one of the representatives' offices and say, how do you intend to vote? And if they're planning to vote in opposition of our principles, then we ask them why. Some of the pieces of legislation that happened with are some of the most egregious as far as our civil liberties go. And we had about half of them that said they were for it and half that said they were against it, and both made very constitutional arguments. So those are the kinds of things that we do. Then we put them through basically a job interview. These representatives work for American citizens.
Right.
They work for us, not we work for them. They represent us, not represent DC to us, right, or their state capital to us. So this is what we expect from them, and this is what it was based upon. And since then, we've gone from just federal offices all the way down to school boards. We actually have programs for each one, right, including the judicial branch, because that's where a lot of legislation ends up, and that's where a lot of additional freedoms get taken away, is in the judicial branch by activist judges. So we realized we had to fix every level of government.
Thank you, Tom. That was a very, very sensitive question and answer. I like you add something to it. I'd like to get your opinion.
Well, with us getting involved in the system, in 2010 I was a candidate and went through the iCaucus system. I did the vetting process with 9 different candidates, and that's how I fell in love with it. It was the toughest interview that I ever had, and I ended up getting the iCaucus endorsement. And that's how I got involved in the leadership of it. And because I sit there and I can see the concept, kind of a purity that's missing in any system of government anywhere in the world. The aspect that people can truly be in control of their representatives again. That we can truly separate massive amounts of special interest and hand power back to the individual. This is something that is missing in the government, and that's why I fell in love with the iCaucus concept and got involved myself. And that's why iCaucus, the way we're doing in the United States, because of our form of government, might be different of how it may be applied in Britain or Iran or in any nation. But it is important for the citizenry to be in charge of the process of electing their representatives instead of small select groups, because that's what takes away liberties and creates oligarchies around the world.
Yeah, Tom, thank you so much. But let me start this question again. I got a question from outsiders, and I'll do it later on. My question is that all of those efforts that you have done, and we have seen, our friends have seen it or so, what do you think is impact of your operation, and do you have some checkpoint in some of those people who are jumping, go to the governmental chair or so, didn't perform their promise or so? Can you do something for them?
Yeah, we tend to want to replace them if they don't hold to their commitments. We also do it in a very public way. We have been known to discipline them while they're in office. We put out a vote to the citizens of their district and ask them, do you want to put them on a suspension? Do you want to pull the endorsement? You know, this is a citizen endorsement. This should be a big deal. Every representative should want this endorsement. Do we have checkpoints? Yes. We have what we call the Sentinel team. The Sentinel team is the one who looks at the legislation, scores the legislation, and then scores the voting of every single representative. Every single representative, whether they're iCaucus endorsed or not. So that we know which districts need to be targeted come next election. This is the only thing that the citizens can do, is remove them from office. If they're not performing, if they're not doing what we ask them to do, what we send them there to do, then we need to replace them. One of the biggest problems is when you see these representatives in office and they've been there 30 years, That's way too long.
Yeah.
And mind you, when they went in, they were not independently wealthy. Now they are. So what does this say to you?
Some come to dynasty.
Exactly.
Living in a better.
Exactly. And I'm sorry, there is not one representative that is good enough to be there that long. Eventually, that they are so removed from the citizenry that they don't even know what they're doing anymore. They don't know who they're representing anymore. 9 times out of 10, they haven't even met the people in their district.
Wow.
They don't go out door to door. They don't meet with the people. They don't answer questions. You go to the town halls, they tell you, write your question down, and maybe we'll let you ask it. If it's oppositional, they're not going to let you ask it. And then they're prepared. They're talking points. They're 30-second sound bites. Our interviews with iCaucus are 45 minutes to an hour, and it's citizens who ask the questions based on what's important to them in the district. So we get answers that you will not hear on TV. We get answers that are honest, and then we have them on recording committing. So again, it's something that we can make public if we need to. If we need to go to the press and say, hey, the citizens endorsed this representative because he said he was committing to not raise the debt limit due to overspending by Congress.
I understand.
Right? Now we can say they've made that commitment, they've violated that commitment to their constituents, and we have written and verbal proof.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Sure.
Before we go to some more questions together, we have some video, then we call it, you've heard a lots of different kind of mafia. I don't name them, mafia, but you haven't heard possibly mullahs mafia. We have about 4 or 5 minutes video that it shows mullahs mafia in our country and in all over the world, that if you're not going to, you know, some time ago I was in Paris. I've seen something about 30% of people walking with mustache and hats and something on their shoulder, different way. They are expanding themselves, those mullahs mafia. That mullahs mafia video, please.
Nowadays, there is hardly anyone in Iran who has not experienced the social hardships of the country, such as high levels of inflation, unemployment, prostitution, addiction, and violation of human rights. Consequently, the majority of people are appalled by the Islamic regime's conduct. Obviously, the Iranians struggle for a chance to free themselves from this devastating situation. But have you ever wondered what choices they have or what options are available to them? On one hand, the opposition groups outside the country seek a regime change, and on the other hand, moderate politicians inside Iran wish for reforms. Naturally, any logical and unbiased person would prefer a reform scheme that could eradicate the mullah's dictatorship as opposed to more drastic alternatives such as another revolution or a military coup. But is the call for reforms a practical solution, or is it just a wishful dream? In order to come up with a plausible answer to this question, we need to examine and understand the Islamic regime's internal working mechanism. Otherwise, we could be foolishly waiting for reforms that will never take place. The mullah's dictatorship operates like a mafia-style network that has seized all resources needed to oppress the nation. This mafia-style network starts with a supreme leader, the heads of the armed forces, national radio and television networks, security council, and judiciary system are all appointed by him and will naturally be loyal to the regime. Notice that the head of the judiciary system plays a devious role that will be revealed later. The key question concerns the role of the supreme leader and how he is appointed. It would have been fair and democratic if the people had elected him and he had the best interest of the nation at heart. But in this mafia-style network, the supreme leader is appointed by a group of tyrannical clergies who are members of the Assembly of Experts. Now, you are probably wondering, who appoints the members of the Assembly of Experts? Well, it is the repressive Guardian Council that has 12 members. 6 of its members are appointed by the Supreme Leader directly. The rest are handpicked by the head of the judiciary system, and their names are handed over to the Parliament for a staged election. Obviously, those elected are pre-approved by the Supreme Leader. Now, do you see the devious role played by the head of the judiciary system that was mentioned earlier? So in practice, it is the Supreme Leader that appoints the Guardian Council, and it is the Guardian Council that appoints the Assembly of Experts, and it is the Assembly of Experts who in turn appoints the Supreme Leader. And by presenting this deceptive scam as divine authority, the regime has been able to bypass the will of the people and contain their opposition. Hopefully, you now realize that the Iranian people have no constitutional recourse to regain their freedom. And as long as this barbaric regime remains in power, there is no hope of any real reforms. Now, if we pin our hopes on these unreachable reforms, then we only have ourselves to blame for any harm done to us or our allies. The Iranians were a loyal ally in the region before the fanatic 1979 revolution, and they will be our best friend once we help them regain their freedom. So go ahead, show your support, and help the Iranians to rise up.
نمنمک باران دیگه رگبار شد خواب بسه هموطن بیدار شد.
Miss Dale, what you have seen, the Mullah's Mafia, what is your recommendation for people of Iran? Because I called them, why do you glue to the ground or so? And they are just sitting and doing nothing. They get used to this kind of lifestyle. So it's very, very important they know what is your recommendation for them, because you know a lot about them now.
We've learned a lot more. They're in a rough position. They are oppressed and repressed. We know that from watching what happened after the uprisings in 2009, 2013 as well. They are in a very tough position. But there were a couple things at the end of that. Well, and one additional one that I'll make a comparison, because I made a note while I was watching that said those positions that the Supreme Leader appoints, although they go by different names in the United States, it's getting to be the same way here. So, you know, when we made that statement, the video statement, and we said that our struggles are the same, the Iranian people need to understand that our struggles are the same. We are having somewhat of the same issues, just not as bad. What would I suggest for the Iranian people? A mass of people, there is not a military defense. Right. To kind of explain what that means in our terms, it basically amounts to they can shoot, but they can't kill you all.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's who's willing to sacrifice themselves. The same concept is something that occurred here. When you heard Tom talk about the Revolutionary War, when we stood up, it was the same thing. There were people who sacrificed themselves. There will be again. If Americans don't take control of their country, we're going to be no better off, and we're going to have to show that again.
Oh, yeah.
the thing that the Iranian people need to know is, one, whereas we did not have the knowledge and had been led astray by untruth and propaganda in the media before, we are no longer there as American citizens. The difference in 2009, 2013 uprisings, well, 2013, the media almost completely blocked it out.
Right.
2009, we, as American citizens, we had this new president. We expected him to do the right thing, right? Because we'd already seen him do messages of support to the Arab Spring and to Egypt. And when he came out and said what he did about not getting involved in family squabbles, my heart sank. Yeah. It was the first time I had seen Iranians stand up for their country in some manner. And I went, I wish I could speak to him. If I had had this platform then, you would have heard me calling you, getting on here and saying to them then, that man, that statement does not represent the American people. The American people support you. The Iranian Americans here, the best thing they can do for their country is get together with other individuals like us so that they can lobby as citizens to their representatives. Guess what? We don't need a license as citizens to lobby our representatives.
Exactly.
So that's one of the best things that they can do. Understand that lobbyists and organizations working out of Washington, D.C. are not telling our representatives the truth on Iran. So they don't know what that truth is. It takes us to get to them and educate them. And this is part of what iCaucus does. We need you involved to do that. We have learned, but you know your history much better than we do. Right. So we need that involvement. The other thing is, be willing to, I hate to go here, but I'm going to, be willing to donate to those candidates that are going to stand up for the right thing. Be willing to work for them. Be willing to vote for them. Be willing to donate to organizations that you can trust. And I'm going to go over some of the questions people had about us so that you know we're not connected to the government. You've already mentioned we're not connected to the political parties. I know you got that point at our meeting. We're not connected to lobbyists. Our members fund our organization. I am the president of the organization. I don't get paid. I volunteer. Because what's most important is the country. What's most important is correcting interference our government has done. This is some of the reasons why we've made the stand.
That's all. Thank you so much. This is another question, but it's a comment from one Iranian who is living this time about 34 years in this country or so. I have seen every single president of United States promised very clearly that we support people of Iran, and a lots of points happened that the fingers could do a lot for Iranian people, and they never done nothing. I'm talking to myself, I'm not asking you, I'm talking to myself. Why do they lie? That's the president of United States lying and lying, and all of them lying. Not one, not two, not three. This is from our Iranian points of view. Let's do it that way. Tom, you've been out about those long discussion. We'd like to know your comments.
Can you rephrase that a little bit for me? I kind of lost what the question is.
He's asking what would we suggest the Iranian people to do, Tom?
The Iranian people need to stand up for themselves first and foremost. there is no nation on earth that can sit there and force change in another nation, because then they become invaders. And then then that government can sit there and say, see, they're invading our country to change the will. Whereas the people stand up. The will is directly reflective of the people. Throughout the history of the world, you have people like William Wallace in Scotland who stood up to the British to fight for Scottish freedom. You have, I forgot the name of him, the guy who, with the 2 snakes in Iran, that stood up and created this purple flag that we had behind us. I just can't remember the name right now, and threw the extreme was out and the first time. These are people that are images of it. And then right now everybody's looking for a leader. And the best example of history that I have is during the American Civil War, the Battle of Lookout Mountain. The Union Army kept moving up the hill against the Confederates. The generals told the men to retreat. Finally, at one point, a soldier carrying an American flag picked it up and carried the flag up the hill. And he led the Union Army up the hill, overran the Confederates, and they won the Battle of Lookout Mountain. The leader does not always have to stand up and be at the forefront and have a sword or be a general. The leaders are within us. We can be the leaders. But we must believe first in the freedom and the will to win. If we don't have that within us, the battle's already lost. And that's what each person in Iran and the United States need to look at. They need to look at themselves and say, have I done enough for freedom? Have I protected the interests of my children having free speech, economic prosperity, economic freedom? Have I done my part to make sure that my children can persevere in this nation or in any nation on earth?
Thank you so much.
May
Go
I
ahead.
follow up on what he's saying, because I really want the people of Iran to know this. The people of Iran are the rightful owners of their soil and their resources.
Right.
Right now, both of those things are being sold off to the highest bidder, so to speak. They have a power that has been taken away from them, or at least has been attempted to be taken away from them. They have a power to fight for and attain their independence, their right to life, the right to be secure in their own homes, the right to know that their family members aren't going to be taken from them, raped, tortured, killed. They have the power if they are able to stand together. That's always the hardest one. And I want them to know, we have a saying here, united, boy, it just went right away. Basically, united we rise, but divided we fall.
Oh, yeah.
What those regimes do, what any regime, and I'll even call ours a regime, because right now they're acting like it, is they divide the people. They divide them into segments.
Yes.
Once they've accomplished that, they will continue to exercise their power. They will continue to oppress. Once the Iranian people understand that now they have the support of citizens of the United States, they have the support of citizens in France, they have the support of citizens in Great Britain, they are getting more support right now. Israel is actually showing them support. Once they realize they are no longer alone, we are uniting with them. We will push. What happened to them before will not happen again. You know why? Because we won't allow it. We can't stop our president from saying what he did.
Right.
But what we can do is show now that is no longer acceptable. We can get our representatives in Congress behind it. The more time goes on, the more the Mullah's regime appears to be getting out of control. They're trying to maintain. Why? Because they feel their hold slipping. They feel that hold on the people slipping.
Yeah.
That gives the people a lot of power if they only knew it. And that would be the message that I would give to them is, I may not be Iranian, I'm your sister. I'm there. You rise, I will rise. You stand, I will stand. You speak, I will speak. Wherever that takes me. If you needed me there, I'd be there. Don't think you need me. I think you're fully capable of doing it yourself. I think that people need to rise up, and I think that people also need to understand that Americans like I am, and this is something that has to be corrected, we're not advocating interference. We want the people to create the change that they want in the country.
Right.
Then we want them to decide on what form of government they want. What works for us here in this country may not work there. I don't want our government stepping in and saying, oh, well, you have to do this. No. They need to choose their own form of government, what works best for them.
That's
to
right.
ensure that they no longer have to worry about being oppressed, to make sure that they have their independence, their freedom, their right to life, liberty, and property. That's what we want for them.
Thank you so much. Before we go close to the end, I would like to let you know that this kind of collaboration between us may ignite some other friends or political groups that we have it. They love to get in touch, come closer. So now here, very clearly, I invite from our friends those political groups like Channel 1 TV, like Dr. Nasr Esfani, like Iman Furutan, all of those friends. Come on in, please. I invite you to come in, please get together, go together, close to iCaucus, and you have listened to all of what you've heard today. These are what we needed. And excuse me for few words in فارسی. ملت ایران عزیزان، هفته دیگه ما تمام این صحبت ها رو، این تجزیه تحلیل ها رو برای شما به زبان فارسی خواهیم داشت. My last question is that you and dear Tom, both of you can talk a little bit about this collaboration and what the other people can do, come closer to, possibly we get hold together.
Tom, why don't you start first, please?
Sure. Can you rephrase the question for me? I was lost with the accent a little bit. I apologize, General.
General, can you repeat the question for him, please?
No, there is not any other question like that because we are approaching to the end of our program. Now, I wanted to see, no, I really want to give you 2-3 minutes or 2 minutes.
Right.
You just, let's do it that way. Do your propaganda for your own organization. Do that, please, because all over the world are listening to us. You can start, or Tom can start.
Tom, any closing remarks from you that you want to share? I'll let you start first.
The biggest part to get involved, and I know there's hundreds of thousands of Iranians in the United States, the appeal that we only have to you is get involved with iCaucus, learn the system, and that way you can call your family members and friends you still have back in Iran and spread the concept. Find candidates that are going to stand up for you and donate to them and get active. The United States' biggest problem is we haven't treated refugees in the right way, and we've really disconnected them from their government, and then when they come here, they're disconnected from ours. In order to maintain the freedoms that brought you here over Germany, Russia, Britain, or Italy, or those nations, was the aspect that you could be accepted and free to choose and protect your children and make a pretty decent life. In order to protect that here, we're going to need your involvement. We need to protect our freedoms so that we can sit there and expand it and make sure that you guys can help spread the freedom in your own country. Our nation doesn't have to be involved in it. But if you get involved in this system and you can see that citizen-led organizations can work, and you spread that over to your country, freedom is like a wildfire, and it is the greatest cure to hatred and tyranny.
Okay. One of the things that I did not say before was that it's in America's rational self-interest to have the people of Iran on our side. For them to topple the mullah's regime, because they're using the extremists as an excuse to take away our freedoms. If they're here in America, understand if we don't change our representation, the current representation at the federal and state levels, all the speaking out that we've done, all of the supporting of Iran is going to come to nothing. We are at a crossroads in this country. Any of the organizations, any of the Iranian American citizens that are here need to be working toward all of the same goals, maintaining what we have here, moving things back in the right direction so that we can provide the appropriate support. Notice I said appropriate, not interference. Appropriate support to the people of Iran. We also need to empower the younger generation.
Right.
We need to educate the younger generation. I know that parents even here attempt to do that. Unfortunately, we do have a public school system, and we do we do have colleges that re-educate them for us, and so it's important that we continue to give them correct information. And I'm not saying that we're always correct. Believe me, if we make a mistake, let us know. But these are the things that these organizations can help with. The struggle of the Iranian people and the struggle that the Americans are currently going through are the same. One is already oppressed, one's heading that way. One's actually in soft tyranny. That's where America is.
Almost are about the same.
Exactly. And so this would be the time for us also to learn from you. This is another way you can get involved.
Right.
We have an Iranian issue, and please excuse my mispronunciation, but we have a page in our education department on the iCaucus website that a lot of you could be putting articles up with information that is accurate. We need to learn from you as well. So this is something that we feel should benefit both of us in that we need to learn from you and you need to learn from us. So that's I think that's the best way we can help each other right now.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Tom Norton, Ms. Dale, and we really hope to have more time, but our time is over, and hopefully we can get together different time, different places, and just start having more cooperation together. Thank you.
Like that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much.